These are my two shiny hunting bots that I designed to automatically find shinies in old Pokemon games, and they were incredibly fun to work on. By controlling the consoles directly, they could hunt for hours and hours without any RSI slowing them down. And I used them to find shinies like this Torchic in Sapphire and Shaman in Pearl. And while the biggest complaint I've had about these are how they're cheating and I'm a terrible person for making these things, they actually have a whole list of issues that I wanted to go over and maybe peek into the future of this project. Just a tad. So let's get straight into it. So back in 2018, I designed the first version of my shiny hunting bot using a Game Boy Advanced SP and a basic electronics kit to hunt for a shiny Torchic, and after it found a horde of shiny pooches, it finally got it in 42,000 resets. But it wasn't until earlier this year that I revisited this project and made the first video about it that was received far better than I ever expected. In this video, I rebuilt the janky version and demonstrated how it works. If you're interested in the details, check out the video in the card, but basically it has wires connecting directly to the DS's board that trigger inputs, and a photoresistor taped to the screen that checks when the screen goes light or dark. As a shiny encounter takes a few extra seconds because of the sparkle animation, I could get it to determine whether or not a shiny appeared. And when it worked, it was great, seeing it go through the motions and find what it was looking for. But what I didn't cover in that video is all of the times that it definitely didn't work. The first issue that I encountered was partly due to the fact that the wires installed directly onto the DS were actually the ones that I installed 7 years ago, and because it wasn't a clean install back then by any definition, things started to come apart. The cables were frayed and messy, and the extensions I made by just soldering and taping more wires to the ends was a very delicate hotfix, and was not durable at all. This meant that moving the DS about would cause some wires to disconnect, either temporarily or in one case, permanently, and I had to solder it back down again to get it back in place. These wires were also a complete mess, and I never really took into consideration where they would run, so they were sticking out of the case from all sides, either through the existing button holes, which caused more problems, or through giant holes in the side that I cut out myself. So not only was I damaging the internals of a DS, I was also damaging the externals. This is generally done when making custom mods, but usually in a more controlled way, and you'd fill the gaps with 3D printed parts to make it look hidden, but I definitely didn't take that approach. But if you're looking at this and thinking it's some sort of abuse, don't worry. I gave this DS a brand new look without all of the ugly mods attached. Because I was using wires running all over the place, it meant that the actual buttons for the console were either blocked because a wire was directly underneath it, or because I had to take them out to make it possible to even run cables. And when you do press them, well, some weird stuff happens. Because of the circuitry and some weird way they're linked, for some reason bridging the actual button pads while having connections to the test pads triggers seemingly random button presses. So if I press the B button, the start button also goes off and things like that. So it's not exactly the most usable in this state. Once I had the wires out of the DS, it was then time to connect them up to the Arduino controlling it. As this was a total prototype experiment with no guarantee of success, I opted to use a breadboard, which was perfect for what I needed, except the only breadboard I had was far too big, which added even more to the issue of moving this shiny bot about. The design on the breadboard was fairly simple. I had these spots for each input, the photoresistor, a few buttons, and a little display for the counter. But when this thing went wrong, I basically just had to power it off and on again, because I didn't really add any control to the system. The two buttons on there are to reset the shiny counter in the memory and skip the encounter if a false positive turned up. But because of the way the Arduino's code works, it's just one big loop, I basically had to just hold down the button I wanted to trigger until it reached that bit of code. And if I missed it, well, I guess it's just going to loop again for no reason. And then of course, there's the simple fact that I haven't really got a clue what I'm doing with electronics. I just poke stuff until it works. And when I'm running my bot, I noticed a few times the screen would flash brighter than normal, especially when soft resetting, which is probably down to me overvolting something or having the wrong resistance somewhere. I don't really know, but what I do know is it's definitely not up to Nintendo's specifications and could cause damage. However, I think it's so minimal that I haven't seen anything drastic even after running the bot for weeks non-stop. This is by no way a claim that it's safe. I would absolutely not recommend doing this, but it's safe enough for me, and that's all that matters. The photoresistor approach, while decent, was very limited as it's only looking at the light level in a single area. Now, this worked quite well as I taped it directly to the screen, creating a blind around it so it wasn't affected by outside light. That is, until the tape would start to come unstuck over time, and even the smallest gap would allow daylight through, messing up the readings, so I had to always make sure that tape was securely fastened. Using tape also meant that once I was done with it, the screen had a lot of residue left over that was pretty tough to get rid of, and would leave blotches behind even after cleaning it with some isopropyl alcohol. But by far, the biggest issue with this design is the complete lack of movement buttons. As the cables were already a mess, and I planned to just hunt Torchic, I didn't bother adding the movement wires to the board, because otherwise it would have been an absolute state. But this really limited the amount of hunts that the bot could take on. For starters, literally, I couldn't choose Trico or Mudkip in this instance, because they both require moving the selection across to them, so it was stuck only hunting for Torchic. But these weren't the only ones it couldn't do. Without any way to move the play around, random encounters, which make up about 90% of all Pokemon, were completely off the table, as I can't run around in the grass, and alternatives like using Sweet Scent also required using the arrows. It also had no way of determining whether or not an egg was shiny, as there's no special animation when hatched, so even if it had a way to collect them, it wouldn't have a clue what it actually got from the egg. Nope, it was only able to tackle specific static encounters. From the entire Hoenn Pokedex, with 202 entries, this bot is able to shiny hunt only 8 of them. Torchic from the starters, Kecleon with the Devon Scope, the Weather Trio of Kyogre, Groudon and Rayquaza, and the 3 Reggies. I think it's also possible that you could take on some of the event Pokemon with it, but they're not technically available without external tools, so I'm not counting them. So you can see just how limiting this bot really is, and why I decided to make a V2, or 3, depending on how I'm counting it. And so, I made this one. And yes, it also kinda sucks. I spent hours making massive improvements over the last one, with my first attempts at designing custom PCBs, but was it really worth it? Well, as it was a prototype, the first obvious problem is that this control board that houses the shift registers just dangles off of the side of the DS, which is pretty ugly. This then connects to the Pi in what is a cleaner install than the first one, but it's still rather messy and not ideal. Having this control board also out the side was leading to some really odd interactions. Basically what I think was happening was that there was a small speck of solder or some wire trimmings on my desk, and by having the board make contact with them, it was firing off random inputs very rarely, which would generally lead it to endlessly scroll through the item bag thinking it's walking left and right, because as it goes to run from an encounter, it's tapped up and moved the cursor. This issue was driving me mad because I couldn't figure it out for ages. It would only trigger once every 100 or so runs, and for a long time I thought it was a solder or code issue. But no, it was something really dumb that I fixed by literally just putting a piece of paper under the board. Great job, me. Another issue, or annoyance, was that I constantly had to SSH into the Raspberry Pi to set up the script every time I needed to restart it for any reason. And for a lot of the project, I didn't know about the screens library, which allows you to detach instances, leaving them running in the background. So I was just keeping the SSH open all the time on my PC. But that was probably a good thing, because let me tell you, working with this camera system was a total bloody nightmare. The way I set the code up was rather rigid, yes, but having to realign the camera every single time I had to restart it, or if I accidentally bump it 1mm off center, was really tiresome. And every single time I did this, I would have to recalibrate the threshold levels in the code, as the lighting was ever so slightly different, throwing it all off. And I don't even know how many times I rewrote those numbers, but it was awful. As the screens on the DS aren't that bright, and the glare on them is pretty bad too, even the slightest difference would cause a catastrophic result. This also means that I had to control the lighting around the shiny bot. I couldn't turn the room lights on because that'll break it, and I had to cover it up from the sunlight coming through the window, or else the shift from day to night would throw it off. And even still, after controlling those, some light from my monitor flashing or standing up and causing a shadow would break it too. So I was really relieved when that video was finished. The final issue with it is the fact that it was quite expensive, to be honest. I ordered all of the custom PCBs, the components, and I had to buy a new camera module because the old one I had was just terrible. And the cost added up. Diving into custom PCBs was pretty fun, and it's something I plan to do again. Hopefully limit it to 1 order per project, and only if I can get a good deal on it. So where's this project going from here? Well, I have plans for 1 more version of this device. I just don't know when or how long it'll actually take to make. And I actually wanted to branch it away from the shiny bot focus and instead basically make an app that can do a whole bunch of things for any game. And so that is why I've got this little board and these chips right here. These are CH552Gs. And this is a little CH552G development board. And the idea is that I replace the whole Arduino Raspberry Pi external processing thing with a simple USB port that can be connected to a PC to control everything through a desktop application that I make. Haven't actually started to play around with these yet, so I don't have a clue how I'm going to achieve this, but you'll probably see something at some point, maybe. That's about as much as I can promise right now, but make sure to subscribe so you don't miss that vague potential of a video. Great self-promo. But anyway, that is going to do it for now. I'm glad most of you like the shiny bot stuff, and to finish off this video, we're going to check in on the latest round of subscriber wars. So let's throw it over to Geeze live in the arena. Geeze? Thanks, Geeze. Today is a big one as we're going to be seeing a VIP deathmatch here at Subscriber Wars. I wonder who is going to survive this main event bout. So let's get the participants in the arena, and here we go. We've already got Tom Proudfoot, Jake Gauntlet, and Marlene fighting at the top there. Oh, there's a bit of a fight here between... Oh, Minimus is taken out, and Sen Swain's come out on top there. The fight at the top left still going on. Fraser Brown doing absolutely nothing. Oh, he's going to fight Sen now. They're going to fight it out. Axe versus Axe. Looks like Fraser is going to find the killing blow. Oh, and he's won. Somehow all three people at the top have died, and Fraser Brown is the winner. Well done, Brownster. Back to Geeze in the studio. Thanks for that great report, Geeze. Congratulations to Brownster for that hard-fought victory. And remember, if you want to join in on the next event, make sure to subscribe to the channel, and for that pay-to-win bonus, consider becoming a channel member. Or check out my brand new Patreon page I just started, where I'm going to be posting some behind-the-scenes content, little extra things that don't make it to the YouTube video. But anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.